Chapter 10. The Trail. The digital clock on my desk flipped past 10 p.m., mocking my lack of progress. February was drawing to a close, and the Veridian Ballet Gala, unqualified fundraising success, partially buoyed by the signed Pointy Shoe Initiative, was weeks behind us. Yet the core questions that had sparked the initiative remained stubbornly unanswered. My discreet inquiries into the company's financials regarding the shoe budget had hit a wall of polite deflection and bureaucratic delay.
"We appreciate your thoroughness, Mr. Stonewall, but these records require additional processing time," Henderson in accounting had explained 3 days ago, his smile thin as the February ice coating the sidewalks outside. Formal requests for detailed supplier invoices and payment histories yielded slow, incomplete responses. Martha, the company's weary costumer, had proven consistently helpful in confirming the scarcity of quality shoes reaching the dancers, a fact starkly underlined by the surprisingly small number of presentable retired pairs collected for the signing initiative. Her warnings about substitutions and delays clashed violently with the expenditure lines I reviewed nightly, lines that suggested abundance, not scarcity. Outside my office window, the late February city glittered coldly under the streetlights. A recent thaw had melted much of the earlier snow, leaving behind dirty, pock-marked snowbanks slumped against buildings and curbs. The air held a persistent, damp chill, and the wet streets reflected the traffic lights like smeared oil paint. Winter wasn't releasing its grip easily this year. My thoughts drifted, unhelpfully, to Elena Laurent. The intense, charged moment we'd shared on the gala balcony felt like unfinished business, a spark of unexpected warmth in the otherwise cold, analytical landscape of my investigation. Her guardedness, her discipline, the flashes of vulnerability. She complicated things in ways I hadn't anticipated and wasn't sure how to navigate, especially when my primary role demanded objective assessment. The P&L variance report on my screen blurred as I recalled her dark eyes, fierce during her passionate defense of the dancers, softer and questioning during that moment on the balcony when the snow fell around us. The financial discrepancies themselves now felt tangled with her presence, her contradictions. "Enough," I muttered, the sound harsh in the quiet office. "Focus, Stonewall." I closed the spreadsheet and gathered my things. Perhaps a drive would clear my head, reset my analytical framework. I couldn't afford this distraction, this personal entanglement. I needed clarity, objective distance. I headed out, taking the route that led past the theater building. Partly habit, partly an investigator's lingering curiosity. The road was quiet this late, the gleam of melting snow under street lamps creating pools of light and shadow. And that's when I saw it again. Just as I approached the familiar stage door alley, two figures emerged, bundled against the cold. Tomi and Ashlyn, principals known to be within Elena's closer circle. Even from a distance, their exhaustion was evident in the slope of their shoulders, the heaviness of their movements. Yet they moved with purpose, glancing quickly up and down the street with practiced vigilance. They didn't head towards the subway station or the bus stop. Instead, a dark, nondescript sedan, the same one I'd seen pick them up late on previous occasions, materialized from the shadows of a side street. The car matched the description of the discreet night owl service Tomi had once inadvertently mentioned in a conversation I'd overheard. They slipped inside quickly, furtively, and the car pulled smoothly away from the curb, heading downtown, towards the warehouse district, not towards any neighborhood I knew dancers to live in. The repetition, the sheer consistency of this late-night pattern, solidified something in my mind. No more passive observation. No more waiting for stonewalled financial reports. Tonight the frustration and the lingering questions coalesced into action. Where are they going? What possible activity requires this level of secrecy? These specific late hours? This particular car service? Could this explain the exhaustion, the rumors, maybe even connect back to the financial anomalies in some way I couldn't yet fathom? I made the decision in an instant, the kind of decisive pivot I'd execute in a high-stakes acquisition meeting. Enough speculation. Tonight I would follow, heart pounding with a sudden, impulsive resolve. I quickly unlocked my own car, parked down the block, slid behind the wheel, and pulled out into the street, keeping the sedan's taillights a manageable distance ahead. Adrenaline surged, sharpening my focus as I joined the sparse late-night traffic. The strategic part of my brain activated, calculating distance and visibility metrics, just as I would analyze risk factors in a complex financial transaction. This felt deeply unprofessional, bordering on obsessive, yet the dead ends I'd encountered through official channels made this impulsive pursuit feel like the only path forward. Answers weren't coming to my desk. Perhaps I needed to find them out here, in the city's shadowed corners. The drive led us away from the familiar, polished streets surrounding the theater. We moved through quieter avenues only illuminated by the occasional glow from apartment windows. The February city felt subdued tonight, hushed under a sky that threatened more snow or freezing rain. The sedan navigated with smooth confidence, avoiding the main thoroughfares still carrying moderate traffic. Instead, it wound through a network of secondary streets, heading steadily south of downtown. The architecture began to shift. Elegant brownstones gave way to older commercial buildings, independent bookstores with darkened windows, galleries shuttered for the night, and then, increasingly, the taller, broader shoulders of converted warehouses and former industrial spaces. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel as I recognized the district. This was the arts district bleeding into something slightly edgier, the zone where avant-garde performance spaces operated alongside specialty nightclubs and exclusive lounges, venues that catered to clientele-seeking experiences beyond the mainstream entertainment districts. The Stonewall development portfolio included several properties on the northern edge of this area, but the sedan was heading deeper in, towards blocks I knew were still undergoing sporadic, uneven gentrification. Just as we entered a particularly dense section, where narrow streets were hemmed in by tall brick buildings that blocked out much of the ambient city light, the sedan signaled abruptly, a quick right onto an even narrower cross street. Then, almost immediately, I saw brake lights flash as the driver prepared for a sharp left turn halfway down the block. I moved to follow, calculating the timing, when the lumbering bulk of a city sanitation truck, its yellow lights flashing, pulled out slowly from an alleyway directly in front of me. I hit the brakes, a quiet curse escaping my lips as the truck began its noisy, grinding process of emptying dumpsters. I craned my neck, trying to keep the sedan's taillights in view down the side street, but the truck blocked my line of sight completely for critical seconds. By the time it finally cleared the intersection enough for me to squeeze past and make the right turn, the side street was empty. Panic, sharp and frustrating, flared in my chest, a sensation I rarely experienced in business negotiations, no matter how high stakes. I accelerated down the narrow street, scanning systematically left and right. Did the sedan turn left as signaled? Or was that a feint? I took the left turn, peering down the block. Nothing but parked cars, dark warehouse doors, and the faint glow of a single bar sign further down. I circled the entire block, my eyes methodically scanning every parked car, every alley entrance, every possible turnoff. Nothing. The sedan had executed a textbook evasion, whether intentional or coincidental. My quarry had vanished into the fog that was now thickening noticeably between the buildings. I pulled over to the curb, cutting the engine, the sudden silence profound after the tension of the pursuit. Gripping the steering wheel, I stared out at the dark, anonymous street, performing a rapid post-mortem analysis as I would after a failed acquisition attempt. Frustration burned, but I forced myself to convert it into actionable thought. I'd been so close. I'd had direct visual contact, a tangible lead, and I'd lost it because of a garbage truck, an unpredictable variable in the equation. The impulsive decision now felt reckless and unproductive. I was alone, in an unfamiliar, slightly run-down part of the city late on a cold night, with no clearer idea of where the dancers were going than when I'd started. The crucial destination remained hidden, swallowed by the labyrinth of streets and the thickening fog. Pursuit by car was clearly futile now. The night owl driver knew these streets far better than I did, and had vanished effectively. I weighed my options with the same analytical detachment I'd apply to an underperforming asset. Continuing a blind search was inefficient, with diminishing returns on time invested. The optimal strategy was to withdraw, recalibrate, and develop a more targeted approach based on the new geographical data point. Nevertheless, I found myself driving another 2 blocks away from where I'd lost them, finding a legal parking spot along a deserted curb. Cutting the engine plunged the car into silence, amplifying the low moan of the wind outside. For a moment I just sat there, staring through the windshield at the dark buildings, the wet pavement gleaming under the sparse streetlights. What was I doing? The question was both literal and existential. Julian Stonewall, CFO, heir to the considerable Stonewall fortune, following dancers through backstreets like a character in a detective novel. It was absurd, unquantifiable within my usual metrics of professional conduct. Yet the persistent irregularities in the Veridian budget, the strange patterns of the dancers' behavior, Elena's fiery defense of her colleagues, they formed a puzzle that defied my attempts at rational analysis from behind my desk. I gave myself a mental shake, pushing doubt aside with the same decisiveness that had earned me my father's grudging respect in the boardroom. I hadn't come this far to give up now. Pulling on my gloves and turning up the collar of my wool overcoat against the damp February chill, I got out of the car. The air felt raw, biting at my exposed cheeks, carrying the metallic scent of approaching snow. I started walking back towards the dense network of narrow streets where the sedan had disappeared, my footsteps echoing slightly in the quiet. The neighborhood felt different on foot, full, quieter, more intimate, but also more desolate. Here, converted warehouses loomed, their upper windows occasionally glowing with the warm light of artists' studios or expensive lofts. But street-level activity was virtually non-existent. A single, dimly lit corner bar emitted the muffled thump of a bass line, its windows blacked out. Further down, a closed vintage clothing store displayed strangely dressed mannequins, like silent, accusing ghosts in the gloom. Most buildings featured heavy, locked doors at street level, some secured with thick chains and padlocks, suggesting storage or light industry rather than welcoming public spaces. The air smelled of damp brick, cold asphalt, and faintly, inexplicably, of ozone, maybe from a nearby electrical substation. I walked methodically, block by block, employing the same systematic thoroughness I would use reviewing complex financial projections. I peered down alleys choked with overflowing dumpsters and debris, scanning doorways for any sign, any clue. 15 minutes turned into 20. The cold began to seep through the soles of my leather dress shoes, a damp chill working its way up from the pavement. Doubt, cold and insidious as the weather, began to creep back in. Was this entire exercise a fool's errand? Were Tomi and Ashlyn simply visiting friends who lived in one of these converted lofts? Was I letting my suspicions about the budget, amplified perhaps by the unresolved intensity of my feelings about Elena Laurent, lead me on a wild goose chase through the city's less savory districts? A pang of professional embarrassment hit me. Julian Stonewall, CFO, skulking through backstreets like a low-budget private eye because of anomalous figures on a ballet company's expense report. My father would find it laughable, Robert would be concerned, Quinn would raise an eyebrow and make some cutting remark about my arts patron phase. It felt absurd. Just as I was about to concede defeat, telling myself I'd resort back to demanding answers from the Veridian Finance Department with renewed, CFO-level authority, I turned onto a quieter side street. This one was lined almost exclusively with the dark brick facades of what looked like old storage facilities or light industrial buildings, most several stories tall, their windows dark or boarded up. The only illumination came from widely spaced, utilitarian street lamps, casting long, weak pools of yellow light onto the wet pavement. Near the middle of the block, set back slightly from the curb, was a particularly nondescript heavy black door. No sign, no visible number. Just solid, impenetrable black steel set into the aged brick. As my gaze swept past it, something small and dark on the sidewalk nearby snagged my attention. A detail a less observant eye might have missed. It lay near the curb, almost hidden in the grime and the dirty, gray remnants of melted snow that collected along the gutter's edge. I almost walked past, dismissing it as just another piece of street detritus, a bottle cap, a discarded wrapper, but something about its precise shape, its unnatural blackness against the wet gray pavement, made me pause. Curiosity, or perhaps just the desperate hope for any lead, made me stop. I crouched down, pulling off one glove despite the biting cold, and reached for it. My fingers, numb from the February cold despite the gloves I'd just removed, fumbled slightly as I carefully peeled the object from the damp, gritty pavement. It wasn't just paper. It was cardstock, thick and high quality, surprisingly resilient despite being trodden upon and exposed to the elements. Even crumpled and stained, it felt substantial. I stood up, moving directly under the weak, flickering cone of light from the nearest street lamp to examine it properly, with the same focused attention I'd give to an anomalous entry in a quarterly financial statement. Smoothing out the worst of the creases, I could see the design clearly now. The matte black surface absorbed the dim light, making the single, elegantly rendered symbol in the center stand out sharply. It looked like a stylized crescent moon intertwined with a licking flame, printed in a metallic silver ink that still held a faint, sophisticated gleam despite the grime. Below the symbol, one word, also in silver, in a clean, modern sans-serif font that spoke of understated expense. Nocturne. That was it. No address, no date, no description of an event or venue. Just the symbol and the name. It wasn't an advertisement meant to draw crowds.
It felt more like a calling card, a password, a subtle marker for those already in the know.
Exclusive, discreet, Nocturne.
The name resonated instantly, clicking into place with all the disparate pieces I'd been collecting. Night. Darkness. Secrecy. It fit perfectly with the late hours. The discreet car service that spirited dancers away after rehearsals. The bone-deep exhaustion I'd seen in their eyes. The hushed tones and anxious glances exchanged in hallways. This had to be it. This had to be the destination. A sharp, cold certainty cut through the fog of my earlier frustration, as clarifying as when a complex financial model suddenly reveals its underlying logic. The fruitless car chase, the feeling of foolishness skulking through these dark streets. None of it mattered now. I looked back down the street towards the heavy, unmarked black door near where I'd found the card. Could that be the entrance? Or was it just nearby, the card dropped by someone arriving or leaving? The flyer gave me a name. A powerful, tangible lead, but the mystery of the exact location, and more importantly, the nature of this place called Nocturne, remained intact. The analytical part of my brain began constructing hypotheses, running potential scenarios.
Holding the damp, slightly stiff card in my hand, I felt a surge of focused determination, the familiar thrill of the hunt that often accompanied unraveling complex financial knots back at Stonewall Development. But this felt different. This wasn't just about finding discrepancies on a balance sheet. This involved people. Artists I was beginning to respect, like Elena, caught up in something hidden and potentially problematic.
This wasn't just about dancers letting off steam at some trendy club. The exclusivity implied by the flyer, the gritty atmosphere of this neighborhood, the sheer level of secrecy involved. It hinted at something more organized, more demanding, perhaps even illicit. Could this be where they were working, performing somehow, outside the strictures of Veridian? The thought seemed outlandish. Dancers of a prestigious company moonlighting in some unknown venue, but it would explain the exhaustion, the need for secrecy, maybe even provide a motivation related to the financial struggles I'd glimpsed. If they were dancing intensively elsewhere, it could explain the accelerated wear on their pointed shoes, even if it didn't explain the budget discrepancy itself. Or perhaps the two were linked in a way I couldn't yet grasp. The questions multiplied, swirling in my mind like the fog beginning to curl around the street lamps. But now they had a focal point, a name to investigate. Nocturne. I carefully, almost reverently, pocketed the crumpled flyer. It felt like the first solid piece of evidence, the first thread I could pull to begin unraveling this tangled mess. Standing there for another moment in the cold, quiet street, the winter night pressing in, the damp chill seeping through my coat no longer felt quite so bothersome. My job, analyzing spreadsheets and demanding fiscal responsibility, felt momentarily subsumed by a more primal drive. The need to understand, to uncover the truth. My next step was clear. Forget the stonewalling from Veridian's finance department for now. My investigation had a new target. Find out everything possible about a place called Nocturne.